Every single dollar that oil climbs adds 2 to 3 cents to a gallon of gasoline. Sounds small, right? A rounding error, something you wouldn't even notice at the pump. But here's the thing. Oil didn't climb $1 this week. It climbed 10 in a single day. And that's just the price of oil. The markets have already reacted. This is just the beginning of what awaits us in the coming months. Iran didn't fall in 2 days. And who will pay for it and how? We'll talk about that today. February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint operation on Iranian soil. Washington called it Epic Fury. Israel called it Roaring Lion. Whatever the name, the result was the same. Cruise missiles hit Iran's nuclear facilities, military sites, and, according to Tehran, killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei himself. By the time you and I woke up on March 1st, Iran had already fired back. Missiles and drones hammered U.S. bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE. 3 American soldiers were confirmed dead, 5 more seriously wounded. And the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point where 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day, went dark. President Trump says this could last up to 4 weeks. 4 weeks. So let me tell you what that means for you. Not in geopolitical theory, not in foreign policy abstractions, but in dollars deducted from your checking account. Because the math is already done. This conflict is draining between $100 and $200 a month from every household in America. That's not a projection, that's not a forecast, that's already happening. I've spent 10 years analyzing how wars overseas become bills at home. And this one moves fast. Let's break it down. Start with the geography, because the geography is everything. The Strait of Hormuz is roughly 21 miles wide at its narrowest. That's it. 21 miles of water between the coasts of Iran and Oman. And through that sliver of ocean flows 15 to 20 million barrels of crude oil every single day. That's not just oil for one country. That's the circulatory system of the global economy. Saudi Arabia ships through it. The UAE ships through it. Qatar's entire LNG export operation depends on it. When I say 20% of the world's oil supply, I need you to sit with that number. 1/5 of all of it. On February 28th, that artery got clamped. Iran's Revolutionary Guard hit tankers. Maersk suspended shipments. Saudi Aramco's Ras Tanura refinery, one of the largest on the planet, took damage. Qatar Energy halted LNG production entirely. Hundreds of oil tankers are now anchored and waiting, going nowhere. So here's what the market did. Brent crude, the global benchmark, spiked 13% in a single session. That's the largest one-day jump in 4 years. It went from a baseline of about $73 a barrel to over 82. It settled somewhere between 77 and 80, but the trajectory is what matters. Capital Economics and Wood Mackenzie are both warning the same thing. If the Strait stays disrupted for more than a few days, we're looking at $100 a barrel. That's not a scare tactic. That's the math of constrained supply. Now, let me give you the formula that Washington never explains on camera. Every $10 increase in the price of oil adds roughly 0.2 to 0.3 percentage points to U.S. consumer inflation. Sounds clinical, sounds abstract. Let me translate. If oil goes from 75 to 100, that's a $25 jump. That could lift U.S. inflation by 0.5% or more, on top of what we already have. And that's not just gas. That's everything that moves on a truck, everything that's manufactured with petrochemicals, everything that's heated, cooled, or shipped. But let's start at the pump, because that's where you'll feel it first. Gasoline futures are already up. Analysts are projecting pump prices above $3.50, possibly $4 a gallon, if oil stays anywhere near 85. That's the first time in 2026 we'd breach that threshold. Every time you fill a 15-gallon tank, that's an extra $7 to $15 you weren't paying last month. Now multiply that by 4 fill-ups a month. That's $30 to $60 just in gasoline. But here's what nobody's talking about on the evening news. U.S. heating oil futures jumped 14.5% in a single day. European diesel surged 20%. If you're in the Northeast, if you heat your home with oil, your next delivery is going to arrive with a very different invoice. We're not even into next winter yet, and the futures market is already pricing in pain. And then there's the pantry. Everything at your grocery store traveled there on a truck that burns diesel. Every cent added to diesel gets folded into the price of bread, milk, eggs, produce. The Department of Agriculture won't publish updated food price projections for weeks, but the supply chain already knows. The trucking companies already know. The warehouses already know. You just haven't gotten the bill yet. Let me show you something now that will either make you furious or make you rethink everything. Probably both. When the markets opened on March 2nd, the first full trading day after the strikes, here's what happened. S&P 500 futures dropped 1.1%. The Dow fell over 500 points. The Nasdaq slid 1.4%. Cross the Pacific, Hong Kong's Hang Seng tumbled more than 2%. Come back to Europe. The Stoxx 600 dropped 1.7%. London's FTSE 100 slipped 1%. Japan's Nikkei was down roughly 2.4% in early trading. Across every major market, on every continent, red. If you have a 401k, if you have an IRA, if you have a target date retirement fund, an index fund, a brokerage account, your nest egg started shrinking the moment the first missile left its rail. 72% of Americans say they're uneasy about this conflict. They should be, because their savings are on the front line. But, and this is the part that should make your blood pressure rise, not everyone lost money, not even close. While your index fund was bleeding, defense stocks were climbing. BAE Systems, the British aerospace and defense giant, up 4%. Hensoldt, the German radar and sensor manufacturer, up 4%. Rank, armored vehicle transmissions, up. Leonardo, Italian defense electronics, up 1 to 4%. These aren't obscure penny stocks. These are the companies building the cruise missiles, the radar jamming systems, the precision munitions being expended right now, this very week, in Iranian airspace. Their inventory is being consumed. Their order books are being filled. War isn't a disruption for them. War is the business plan. War is the earnings beat they didn't have to forecast. And then there's big oil. Exxon rose in pre-market trading. Chevron rose in pre-market trading. These are the companies that pump, refine, transport, and sell the commodity that is now suddenly, violently scarce. The same commodity that's going to cost you more at the pump, more on your heating bill, more on every piece of food that arrived at your store on a diesel truck. Their revenue goes up precisely because your cost of living goes up. That's not conspiracy, that's the structure. Now flip the coin. The losers. Airlines got gutted. On March 1st alone, a single day, 2,800 flights were canceled across the Middle East and connected routes. Before the conflict, roughly 90,000 passengers transited daily through Gulf aviation hubs, Dubai International, Abu Dhabi, Doha's Hamad International. These are some of the busiest airports on Earth, connecting flights from Asia to Europe, from Africa to North America. Millions of itineraries thread through those hubs. And on February 28th, they went dark. Dubai's airport was damaged, Abu Dhabi's airport was damaged, Airspace across the Gulf closed. Airline stocks cratered, not just because they can't fly, but because the jet fuel they'd need to fly now costs dramatically more. Cruise lines took hits for the same reason: fuel costs and route disruptions. So let me be direct about the mechanics of what happened to your money. The cash your retirement fund lost did not evaporate. It migrated. It flowed out of the sectors most people hold: technology, consumer discretionary, travel, financials, and into the sectors that profit from instability: defense and energy. The S&P 500 is a weighted average. When some of its components rise and others fall, the net number goes down. But inside that number, there are winners collecting the losses of everyone else. Your portfolio subsidized their gains. That's how it works. Wall Street doesn't mourn crises. Wall Street reprices them. And then there's gold, the oldest fear gauge in human history. Gold surged to 4-week highs, up between 1 and 2.8%, trading between $5,329 and $5,395 per ounce. Gold is now up roughly 20 to 24% year to date in 2026. The US dollar rallied, up about 0.8%, because in global oil shocks, money floods into the currency of the world's largest net energy exporter. Treasuries got a bid. These are textbook safe haven moves. When the world gets scared, capital doesn't disappear. It runs. It runs to gold, to dollars, to government bonds. Not because they're great investments, because they're bunkers. And right now, money is building bunkers. Now here's the part of this conflict that nobody wants to think about. Not because it's unlikely, but because it doesn't fit into the mental model most people have about war. War is supposed to involve missiles, aircraft carriers, soldiers in body armor. It's supposed to happen over there. But here's what 10 years of tracking these conflicts has taught me. The most dangerous weapon a country like Iran has against the American mainland isn't a ballistic missile. It's a keyboard. Iran cannot project conventional military power onto U.S. soil. It doesn't have the Navy for it. It doesn't have the Air Force. It doesn't have the logistics chain. It cannot invade. It cannot bomb. It cannot land troops. But it doesn't need to, because the battlefield in 2026 is not just geographic. It's digital. And digital has no borders. The Atlantic Council's Thomas Warwick said it as plainly as any analyst can. Iranian leaders will almost certainly attempt asymmetric attacks against the United States. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, disinformation campaigns designed to fracture public opinion and amplify chaos. And potentially, he said this explicitly, direct targeting of U.S. officials on American soil. The Department of Homeland Security has already elevated its threat posture. Back in mid-2025, months before any of this happened, months before the first bomb fell on Tehran, DHS published a bulletin citing an elevated threat from Iran-linked cyber actors. That was when things were tense, but still diplomatic. That was before we killed their supreme leader. Think about what's connected to the internet in your life right now. Your bank account, your brokerage, your power company's billing and grid management, your hospital's patient records and diagnostic systems, your city's water treatment plant, your state's voter registration database. Iran's cyber capabilities are not theoretical. They are documented, cataloged, and assessed by every Western intelligence agency. Iranian state-linked hackers have been caught probing U.S. financial systems. They've been caught targeting energy infrastructure. They've been caught running coordinated influence operations across social media. The FBI and DHS are right now on high alert for Iran-linked hacking or operational plots. That's not me speculating. That's the government's publicly stated position. Now, here's the more immediate, more tangible part. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are stranded overseas right now. The Associated Press reported a massive wave of stranded travelers after the strikes shut down most of Middle Eastern airspace. Airports in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, damaged or closed. Americans who were on business trips, on vacations, studying abroad, visiting family, all caught in a conflict zone that was a tourism destination 72 hours earlier. One American businesswoman in Dubai described spending days bouncing between hotels, desperately trying to rebook flights while missiles arced overhead. She's not a soldier. She's a project manager who flew in for a conference. So the conflict doesn't need to send a single Iranian soldier to American soil to reach American lives. It already has, through the price of oil, through the value of your retirement account, through stranded travelers with no flights home, and if the intelligence community's assessments are accurate, potentially through your power grid, your banking app, or your city's infrastructure. The modern battlefield doesn't respect oceans. It travels at the speed of fiber optics. All right, I've spent the last 10 minutes telling you how this conflict is reaching into your life, how it's already in your gas tank, in your heating bill, in your grocery cart, in your retirement fund, and potentially in your digital infrastructure. That's a lot of bad news. So now let me spend the next 2 minutes giving you something more useful than fear. Let me give you a plan. Because here's the political reality, and I need you to hear this clearly. A Reuters Ipsos poll shows only 25% of Americans support these strikes. 43% actively disapprove. 72% say they're uneasy about the direction of this conflict. But the bombs are already falling. Congress wasn't consulted before the operation launched. The 2026 midterms are 8 months away. Politicians right now are not calculating your budget. They are calculating their positions. They're running approval numbers and donor calls. They're trying to figure out which side of this war is the safe side to stand on when election season arrives. Democrats are already calling this a war of choice. Republicans are rallying behind the commander-in-chief. None of that helps you pay your bills in March. So you do the math yourself. Here's how. First, your household budget. Assume elevated energy costs for a minimum of 60 to 90 days. That's the conservative scenario. Analysts give a 50 to 70% probability that this campaign drags on for weeks to months, not days. If oil crosses $100 a barrel, and multiple credible firms say it can, the Federal Reserve is not going to cut interest rates. In fact, they might be forced to signal even tighter policy. That means your mortgage rate stays where it is. Your credit card APR stays where it is. Your auto loan stays where it is. There is no relief coming from monetary policy in this environment. So build in an extra $100 to $200 a month in combined fuel, heating, and grocery inflation. If you have room to cut discretionary spending, streaming services, dining out, impulse purchases, cut it now, before the bill arrives, not after. Second, your digital security. This is not paranoia. This is not prepper fantasy. This is the Department of Homeland Security publicly stating that Iran-linked cyber actors represent a credible threat to American infrastructure. Turn on two-factor authentication on every financial app you use, your bank, your brokerage, your Venmo, your PayPal. Change any password you haven't changed in the last 12 months. And here's one most people don't think about. Keep a reserve of physical cash at home, enough to cover 72 hours of essential expenses. Not because the banking system is going to collapse, it's not, but because even a temporary disruption to online banking or payment processing during a cyber incident Even one that lasts 48 hours can leave you unable to buy groceries, fill your tank, or pay for a prescription if you are fully digital. Cash is a backup generator for your financial life. Third, travel. If you have any plans involving the Middle East, the Gulf states, or any route that connects through Gulf aviation hubs, check State Department advisories immediately. Do not assume your airline has updated you. Do not assume your layover in Dubai or Doha is still operational. Thousands of Americans learned this the hard way when 2,800 flights were canceled in a single day. If you are currently abroad in the region, register with the nearest U.S. Embassy. Have backup itineraries. Carry a printed copy of your passport and a list of emergency contacts. Your phone might not work if local networks go down. Fourth, your investments. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not investment advice. But understand what you own. If you're 100% allocated to a broad market index fund, you are currently absorbing losses in tech, consumer, and travel, while defense and energy stocks inside that same index are rising. The net effect is negative for you. Look at your allocation, understand your exposure, decide with your own risk tolerance and your own timeline whether that's the position you want to hold through a multi-week military campaign. Some people will want to rebalance, some people will want to hold. The worst position is ignorance. These are not moves that will make you wealthy. These are moves that keep you from being blindsided. There's a difference between preparing and panicking. Preparing is quiet. Preparing is math. Panicking is what happens when you didn't prepare and the bill shows up anyway. Here's what I know after 10 years of watching wars become line items on household budgets. This conflict, whether it lasts 4 weeks or 4 months, has already repriced your life. 3 American soldiers are dead. 5 more are seriously wounded. 201 Iranians are reported killed. 747 injured. 9 Israeli civilians are dead. 121 wounded. Oil is up 13%. Your 401k is down. Gold is up 20% this year. Your next tank of gas is going to cost more. Your next heating bill is going to cost more. The groceries in your cart, the ones that traveled on diesel trucks through a supply chain that depends on stable energy prices, are going to cost more. And the people making the decisions in Washington, in Tehran, in the boardrooms of defense contractors and energy conglomerates and insurance underwriters are not the ones paying those prices. You are. That's not cynicism. That's the accounting. 20% of the world's oil flows through a strait that is 21 miles wide. And right now, that strait is a battlefield. The price of that battlefield is denominated in dollars per barrel. And those dollars come from one place: the wallets of ordinary people who never asked for this war, never voted on it, and never had a say. I'm not going to tell you whether this war is justified or reckless or necessary or criminal. That's above my pay grade. That's your call as a citizen and as a voter. What I am going to tell you is this: the cost is real, it's quantifiable, and it's already in your budget, whether you've noticed it yet or not. So let me ask you one thing before you go. How much is a gallon of gas in your city right now? Drop it in the comments. Tell me where you are and what the price board says. Let's track this spike together in real time from every state, because that number, the one on the pump, the one you see every single day, is the most honest scoreboard this conflict has. More honest than any press briefing, more honest than any approval poll, more honest than any headline. If this breakdown was useful, hit subscribe. I'll be covering the economic fallout of this crisis every week until it's over, or until the bills stop climbing, whichever comes first. I'll see you in the next one.